Hello, this is Christine Fisher. We are able to assert the business interests of our industry at two levels. First, with our advocacy at the national and international levels with ANSI, ISO, IEC, and ITU standards. Second, with our engagement and advocacy at the state, county, village, and municipal levels, in which we are able to adopt either partially or whole cloth the standards developed nationally and internationally. We care about international standards because U.S. regulatory policies frequently take their inspiration from regulators in other nations, but these policies only have practical effect on total cost of ownership when they are incorporated by reference into building codes and set the standard of care for real asset operation and maintenance throughout the life cycle of a single building or in the cities within cities that are our campuses. Thank you for calling in to our weekly update. I am Christine Fisher and I will be your host today. Before I turn the call over to Mike Anthony, is everybody able to hear us okay?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Okay, great. Thanks, Christina.
You're very welcome.
So we have on our call, obviously, Christina. We have Andrew Green, our man in Ann Arbor, so to say. We have a guest, Mark Kruger, who some of our viewers will see that he's actually prepared a presentation that you can access on the on this web page, and of course our man in LA, who every week tries to make us sound a little bit better, help us sound a little smarter than we really are. How's life in LA there, Mr. Toner?
Good. Pretty much the same as in Arbor. There's people walking around with graduation caps and gowns.
Well, in the interest of time, well, that's our product, right? Everything we do is directed to making, as I was talking to people earlier, we just sold those kids a house. We want to make it a little bit, just a little, the upward pressure on that we want to get down, and we do that with what we call the accumulation of marginal gains, keeping up a running fire of ideas at all times to innovate our cities, our campuses. So that's it for introductions. We do have, as I said, we do have our guests. I want to run through the week's work, however, and I'm going to get out of presentation mode and let you see. We try to, of course, our charge is to make things safer, simpler, lower cost, longer lasting. My job is to say that endlessly, and of course to keep us on beam. So this week you'll see. Let's see. I think we had another 10 or 15 issue week. Today it turns out that the U.S. Department of Commerce had released their figures on what the construction spend rate is. I like to remind people every month when this number comes out that we spend more in our industry than any other industry in the building business. Yesterday we dealt with, that's important because just because it allows us to first of all get the attention of our suppliers, but it also very often you're going to find experienced people say that not even people within our industry understand that. Educators may not be as close to the numbers as we are, but we need to be there so we can deal with our suppliers. Yesterday we dealt with another confined space standard. I mention that only because OSHA has had one that's gone back to the 70s. We have seen NFPA 350 come in the past couple of years. I believe this particular standard is one that's been, or this is certainly not the first revision, but this document has a fair acceptance within the industry, to the best of my knowledge. So we will be meeting on that on May 20th. We have the Telecommunications Industry Association is preparing a standard for physical network security. This is when you have, if you look above your suspended ceilings, you may see cable tray, and very often there's wires in those cable trays, and there's some concern that there are security risks to the information flow through those wires that are above the plenum in the cable tray. So this particular standard deals with that and other issues along the vertical and horizontal plane. We have, okay, so this is our weekly focus on a particular state. This is a classic example. I actually ran into this week in which some of our planners were wanting a code interpretation. It was a fairly clear case where all of these standards either left a gap or were conflicting. In the case of this particular issue, despite, what do we have, 6 organizations dealing with lighting, there remained a gap. So we're going to deal with that as we normally do in the long term, and whenever variances are requested or whenever enforcers have difficulty or whenever designers have difficulty, we need to get in there and see what we can do at the code level. So that's what New York State. New York State was one in which they seem to be proactive in trying to limiting light. Of course, what you run into that with the dark sky activists is that you run afoul of some of the goals of the building safety people and some of the organizations that would like to have enough light to take photos or to track the faces of people who are not doing good things in the dark on campuses. So there's the safety sustainability trade-off that we have to make, and then it's complicated by dark sky activists. So I don't think we're going to see that go away anytime soon, but we thought we would turn that over to the IEEE Education Healthcare Facility Committee, and let's see what they come up with from an electrical engineer standpoint. So we're dealing also, we continue watching this EPA proposed rule 111D. Has to do with what some are calling rather radical changes in how we manage our energy generation resources. It's important for us to stay too much out of the politics. We do want to make it visible to the people who follow us because it will play into our significantly into our energy conservation goals or our greenhouse gas reduction goals. So we try to stay away from the politics from that, but just let people make their own judgment on it. Let's see, what do we have here? We have Rehabilitation Engineering and Assistive Technology Society of North America. So there's a lot of concern for the human rights of people with disabilities. So as we already know, there is a federal law, I think it's administered by the Department of Justice, regarding civil rights for the individuals with disabilities. So here's yet another standard. It may affect us, I believe, because of they're creating a standard for evacuation devices. I believe this is the first revision. No, it's a new one. It's a new one, and this could significantly change how we design, how people who who have disabilities, how they get out of the building in the case of a fire or other emergency. And I think we started the week. Yeah, we started the week here dealing with a new ASME standard regarding how you rate power plants. So this is a good group to do that. We'll have a teleconference on it on May 12th. So with that, that's pretty much what the week looked like. As I say, we'll have one more ASHRAE we'll be posting one more blog post later today regarding ASHRAE 36. So before I get back into our Prezi, are there any questions, comments? No? Okay, let's get going then. So we'll, another part of what we do often is what we call numbers to steer by. Numbers come in. I will tell you that this particular number is one that was left over. Mike, this is what I wanted to get done last week, and I wanted to splice this in, but I have to tell you, when I looked at this number, I was a little bit alarmed. I've heard people confirming whether this number is correct. Bottom line is, we think that our industry is spending about $30 billion on energy. That would be about 10% of our annual spend. 10% of your annual spend looks kind of like what we saw last week when we were looking at the percentage of a budget, an enterprise budget, when it's dedicated to energy. What I'm asking with this is a rather difficult question. Of course, it's always sensitive, is that even though I understand and accept and a person that's trying to get this $30 billion to zero, right? That's what the whole net zero movement is all about. We want to completely eliminate our industry's utility bills. I'm going to ask a question about, is 30 billion, let me say it this way, how many people do we have involved the salaries, the time, the resources they're using to save $30 billion. I don't say $30 billion is not important, but I will say that knowing what I know about how many staff are being used to deal with getting the energy conservation problem under control, I'd ask a question: are those resources being effectively, given that comparatively it's a relatively small number? Of course, many people will say the number is complicated because it involves the future of the Earth with global warming, etc. So that's not what I want to get into here. I'm just letting you know that we seem to have an order of magnitude number that a number of people believe in, and this is what was missing from last week in our numbers to steer by. The next one, of course, is we've already talked about this. And here's where I'm going to invite my colleague Mark Kruger, who did the main presentation, pre-recorded it, and the person who I've worked with a number of years on codes and standards advocacy. I'm hoping, Mark, you can give me some relief here so I can take a sip of coffee. And from this point forward, remember that we can talk a little bit more about the substance of your presentation. So do you want to talk a little bit about these numbers, Mark?
Okay. You're still drinking coffee this late in the afternoon? That doesn't surprise me that much. Yeah, these are numbers that were assembled by BOMA International. BOMA is the Building Owners and Managers Association. They've been active, quite active in the last few years, working on code advocacy with their group, trying to encourage more of their members to become involved in code-related activities because they feel that there's a substantial financial benefit to them. And I would point out especially that number down in the lower right-hand corner where they estimate that approximately $70,000 per building is construction costs that they have avoided through changes, positive changes that they've made in some of the code requirements. Building code requirements is what we're talking about specifically here, but also in avoiding some of the other changes that were proposed by others, and they've been able to avoid having those incorporated into the code.
So my understanding is that BOMA is largely, its membership is comprised largely of commercial building owners. Is that fair, or are they building buildings for colleges and universities? Sometimes some developers will build a building, and I'm thinking specifically of the housing business. That turns out to be a rather attractive revenue stream for investors because it's backed up essentially, at least indirectly, by federal loan guarantees. So
yes, these are primarily commercial construction, and it is both building owners and the managers, the property managers that manage those facilities for owners. Yeah, I agree. There are certainly universities now that have teamed up with, especially in residential construction, and there are commercial developers that are building buildings, residential buildings at universities now.
Mm. Well, I mentioned
primarily commercial office, medical office building, retail, those types of construction.
I mention that because it often comes as a surprise that in our building code universe that K-12 is regarded. K-12 is largely classrooms. That square footage is fairly well covered in the building codes because it's the safety rules, at least, are mindful that students in K-12, generally below 18, are a special risk because of maturity, the ability to move. There are many things that are inherent in the K-12 as a classroom space. What's different at the college and university level is that we're classified as commercial space. So that if you take a commercial bill or a classroom, people will think, well, geez, that's a classroom. You say a liberal arts college. That the design, the safety design characteristics are informed largely by occupancies that are above age 18 and older. Do you have any? Do I have that nearly right, Mark?
Yeah, no, that I would say that is right. Yes.
Right. So that will come as a surprise to our industry. A couple numbers, I should have numbers to steer by. Ted Winder at Purdue's got these numbers. It turns out that K-12 occupancies are occupied about 80% of the time. But in our industry, and again I'm hazarding this number, our classroom buildings are occupied 20% of the time. Let me say that again using the Pareto rule. Classrooms are used about 80% of the time for a given business year. That's for K-12. Colleges and universities, that square footage that we're building with all the marquee, with all the benefit, the donors and all the other kind of money that goes into building a marquee and a permanent, attractive, architecturally sensitive building, that's only used 20% of the time. How about that for a number? Okay, so I'll go to where we were, Mark, before, and this is really where I wanted to dwell a little bit more. You make this point in your 20-minute video clip on just to remind everybody that you can see Mark's presentation in the whole right here on the web page. It runs about 20 minutes, and it's just Mark, fortunately, and it's very, very informative. Because of our time and what we try to get done on these Friday afternoons, I leave it there for you to understand. But I would like you to comment a little bit more on the incorporation by reference in the state and local relationships, at least the state interpretation of the national standard. Now, this is where the substance, I feel, of what for us, at least for this week, this is the core, and this is why it's most important to us this week. Could you embellish, talk a little bit more about this, Mark?
Okay. Yeah, the point of this slide was to encourage people to be involved in the two different aspects of how codes become law, become the ordinances we live by. First is in the code development, which is done nationally in the building codes by the ICC. And in BOMA, they actually are involved in those. They have staff members that work on ICC committees, and they're involved in that. Obviously, that needs a great deal of support. It takes a lot of time. They've just been meeting in Memphis over the last 2 weeks, pretty much continuously for 2 weeks, having hearings on the code changes that are coming up next. And then also in the adoption of those model codes here in Michigan, the model codes proposed by the ICC are reviewed by an ad hoc committee. I've served on that committee the last 2 code cycles, and that committee reviews every change that ICC has made in the last code cycle to see how it will affect construction here in Michigan, and we make recommendations to the director of licensing and regulation that he incorporates into the rules, the administrative rules that are the Michigan Building Code. Mm-hmm. And you have opportunity to influence those either by becoming involved in the ad hoc review committee, and also by submitting code change proposals to that committee for review. And then finally, after those rules are assembled by the director, there is a public comment period that also they go through.
Okay. To add what Mark had to say and to make it site-specific to the University of Michigan and Michigan colleges and universities, we do have, of course, we have a project-oriented website. This is one that actually will apply to many other states. We picked Michigan for the obvious reasons, but we also have Nevada and New York and New Jersey and Massachusetts coming in the next few weeks. We'll have somebody like Mark from each of those states explaining what's going on there. So So you can see here that when you get into the, say, this is the Single State Construction Code Act. Would you want to explain for a moment, Mark, why it was so important for Michigan, and in fact, other states, to deal with a single state construction code?
Well, yeah, up until just a few years ago, all of the municipalities in Michigan were allowed to adopt their own code. Most of them chose to adopt the BOCA building code, but they were free to choose whatever code they wanted, and they updated it as frequently or infrequently as they wished. And that created an environment, especially for designers, but also for the contractors trying to meet those codes, where it was very difficult because it would depend on which municipality you were working in. So a few years ago, the state adopted a uniform statewide building code, which makes it a lot easier. Then we all know what code we're working under, no matter where we're working within the state of Michigan. It happens to be the ICC code, which is, as I said earlier, widely used around the country. So, except for the fact that each state, the state of Michigan and in other municipalities, they do make some small changes to that. So, but it gives you most of the ground rules under which you need to work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If you don't mind, I'm going to take us back to the Incorporation by Reference webpage. We are coming onto our time limit here. These updates are on Incorporation by Reference. I should have had this up before that, but we dealt with this on, was it how long ago was this? Here we go. We did this back in back in March, and it's an important issue because when you come to understand the importance of why the the Technology Transfer Advancement Act, NTTAA, is a public law, a federal law that wants to encourage individual industries to develop their own standards or standards of care. And if you don't do it, then the federal government will come in, and that's usually not optimal, and almost every nation understands that when you start to run innovation through the federal or central agency, it tends to impede. So they learn very quickly that you cannot throttle your innovators by running every idea through Washington. So that's what the National Technology Transfer Advancement Act, and whether it's you run it through Geneva, or whether you run it through Rome, or whether you run it through Paris, they all learn very quickly that it's easy to overregulate. So that's why I have this law. The difficulty, of course, is that these documents end up becoming public law by reference. And as I like to say that, how do I say it, Andrew? I say Hollywood is, politics is like Hollywood for ugly people, and standards development is politics for people who don't want to run for public office. What I mean.
Yep, that's right.
That's how I get it. Did I get that right?
That's how you say it. That's how you say it.
Easy, right. So essentially, when you get on the committees that Mark was talking about, you become effectively a legislator by proxy. And of course, you have a vote. You have to collaborate with others if you're going to actually get something done. Because remember, as we explained elsewhere, that if you have consensus, you need to be really worried about when decisions come easy. That means you probably don't have a cross-section of interests. So we covered that before also. But I did want to bring this particular page up to the attention of our viewers here, so that you understand a little bit more depth. When we talk about, this is our main document to try to convey the notion of incorporation by reference, because this is the law that you see, but way down here is all kinds of action. Most of the action's happening down here, and that's where we need to be. So let's see here. All right, I think, where do we last leave our heroes? Here we are. I think after this, let's go to where are we going next on this one. Just our final bullet points. The National Technology Transfer Advancement Act encourages private sector. So we've already been through that, and I did that for you. And of course, I also said that American National Standards developed mindful that the market is best served when a minimum standard of care is established. So you don't want to go overboard. When I talk about a market, we can have another discussion about how standards developers need to stay in business. Standards developers are what we call the thin blue line, at least what I call the thin blue line between total government control or central control, which everyone knows throttles innovation and development, and the ability for an entire industry to control its destiny. And of course, we're under a lot of pressure to get that number, to get the cost of an education, and to increase the value of the research industry to the American economy. State and local governments will adopt standards whole cloth or partially. So Mark has already covered that. And of course, I'll make the statement here that it's the federal law. It's not one that's widely known. But every time you look at a pipe and you see the word ANSI on it, or every time you see a cabinet that has the ANSI logo on it, that means that they have, that particular standard of care has been established by an open, transparent, and balanced group of materially affected stakeholders. So as always, I try to have a cinematic moment, and Mark, you probably didn't know about this, but it can be a very dreary business. So I dramatize the what we do here with some numbers. This was a particularly important number, and I actually brought this up at our meeting a couple of days ago. We've been struggling with how to fairly assess what our enterprise, the value it adds to our industry. And we were settling on about 2 to 3%. 2 to 3%. After we were estimating 1 to 2%, we figured 1 to 2 is a larger percentage from 2 to 3. So we're somewhere about 2.5% of value add. And oops, I have to get on my. Oops, did I just lose my? Excuse me. Sorry. Did you see my screen go dark on us? There we are.
No.
I'm sorry. Okay, just because I wasn't touching my screen, that's why. All right, here we go. So here we are with Mark coming up with this $3.50 a square foot for $100 a square foot piece of commercial property. Could you give a little color and insight to this, Mark?
Well, again, this is a number that I borrowed from BOMA International. This is their estimate of savings per square foot that they have achieved by defeating some particular, I guess, those particular code changes that were proposed by others. I think you can kind of see that there's a lot of those that are proposed by people with specific interests and not always considering the entire building and its efficiency and long-term, I guess, the long-term costs of some of these things. So I think they've actually changed that number. I think at this point they're talking more in terms of about $6 a square foot.
That's the number I fear. If I roll in and start saying we're adding 6% of value add, which in some enterprises, I think there are some industries, probably the tech industry sees that kind of revenue growth. And correlating revenue growth with avoided costs can be risky, but it gives us a dimension. It gives us some order of magnitude estimate of what the value of this enterprise adds. But of course, as I like to say, that the fact that there are other interests. Remember, our standard system, it's composed of a mix, a balanced, open, and transparent market of materially affected stakeholders. Unless these people are allowed, these interests are allowed to have their say, whether we agree with them or not, our system breaks down. I also like to say it as that creativity is not efficient. That's my favorite way of saying is that when you're creating something new, and I like or new or original or moving or innovating at the speed necessary for the common good, there's a lot of stuff that has to get thrown out. And at least for our industry, we're in general agreement here. Other people will say, it sure looks like you guys are against safety. Of course, my answer is that We are for safety. The difficulty is that you've missed a word. It's net safety. We can do anything we want. We just can't do everything we want. We have to balance risk. I don't carry a $10,000 deductible on my automobile. You know, we can't. I can't insure it. You can insure everything. You can walk around the street with a helmet on your head for the rest of your life. You have to decide where you're. So this is. So when I see some of these here, I'm saying, yeah, I agree with them. And there are some people that said, you know, Mike, I don't think there's a problem with tornado shelters in a small one-room schoolhouse. So anyway, the point is that we have to allow these other interests to come and have their say, and to claim that they are that this is value add. It's hard. It's a hard number to work with. We know it's there. In fact, we are working with the Government Accounting Standards Board to try to get a vocabulary together for avoided regulatory burden, because there is not a CEO that doesn't conduct a conference call that doesn't mention regulatory burden. And that's what we're trying to manage here in a respectful way, knowing that our mission is to contribute to our industry's innovation ambitions, but as well to try to stay in business. So with that, any questions or comments? Did I miss anything? We're on our time limit now, so just be mindful this doesn't last too much longer, but I'm open to any other questions or reflections, final reflections.
I appreciate your comment about someone not seeing a problem with a tornado shelter in a one-room schoolhouse being a storm spotter. I chuckle at that one.
Yeah, I always like it when you laugh. Makes me think somebody's listening.
Well, I mean, to the point about safety concern, you know, no one walks around with $10,000 worth of insurance. Yeah, it seems like we cut costs when it comes to safety until something bad happens, and then we get on our soapboxes and create groups and come up with policies, and we have meetings with coffee and donuts so we can show that we're busy and being productive. So,
yeah. I have another word. It's called for a term. It's called enforcement by litigation. In light of the fact that we can't conform, especially in the operation and maintenance standards, and there's a lot of them. Remember, first cost is only 20% of the life cycle costs. We've got 80% of what it costs to run a real asset over its life is in the operation and maintenance. So you roll along. We have many examples like this where we have to moderate it. We have to go along. Most agencies, it'd be fair to say, and Mark, you're welcome to question me on this, are hoping nothing bad happens, but they're prepared that if they get caught not conforming, that the cost is minimal. Did I say that right, Mark? Or what do you think about the notion of enforcement by litigation?
Well, that is certainly that is what most of us are trying to avoid, I guess, is to try to be able to meet a standard so that we can use that to avoid litigation. I mean, bad things will happen. I mean, it's there are things, you know, accidents happen. So when they do happen, we want to make sure that we've met what the rest of society has decided is safe. Mm-hmm. And that's what the standards are.
Yeah, it's a reference. It's a benchmark, something to steer by.
Yeah. I did want to point out to you were talking about, you know, incorporating standards by reference. The Michigan Licensing and Regulation Agency does have a list on their website of the reference standards for the Michigan building codes.
They do.
They do, and there's probably something like 70, what they consider the essential reference standards, probably 75 or 100 of them, that if you bought them all would cost about $10,000 or $20,000.
Well, right. Particularly egregious are some of the mechanical codes. That raises the point about what had driven this is that there are good people who disagree on whether or not those standards should be made available for free. I think the weight, based on what ANSI's actions are, is that they are going to be given for free in a reasonable way. It makes sense, the claims that if these are adopted by reference, that that they should be available to the public. You should know the law. However, you've got to finance that marketplace. You know, somebody owns the NASDAQ trading platform. Somebody owns the Dow Jones. All those gadgets and all that whole platform to get those ideas, to get that price and bid action. That's not cheap. And to put together a standard, and as somebody who's been on the committee, one of the main committees in the country for about 20 years, there's an enormous amount of administrative investment to keep this process clean. So I'll only say that when we start to see the price of review standards be $30 or $300, we should be mindful that there are administrative costs to keep this stuff legal and fair. So that's me speaking on behalf of the ANSI standards developers. Because we know that the price we pay, if everything goes through a central authority, that we bog down our economy. Okay, I think then that would be it. Oh, my final statement here is that we're not throwing thunderbolts here. We're looking for little small things along the way. I like to show this diagram at the very end because somehow we got from the Ford Model T to the car I can't afford to this lunar rover. And if we continue this running fire of ideas, we can innovate on our cities. I try to show this little dim city down here, and I'm trying to convey the action, the speed at which we have to work. Speed is an essential characteristic of what Standards Michigan is doing. So with that, I think, Christina, any closing thoughts other than have a great weekend?
No, I think it's all in how you frame the problem or the message, and the folks that want to create these regulatory, I suppose, burdens are motivated, and they're framing their message in such a way that sounds like a good idea. So you need to balance that with a rational message on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Good. So Christina will be, just so everyone knows, Christina will be helping more getting these messages out better. When I talk about accumulation of marginal gains, I include myself in that equation. So I know that there's a lot to be done, but we like to apply a discipline of once a month, once a week, looking back and reflecting upon what we did. Were we on task? How can we get better? And that's what these are all about. And I thank you very much for your time.